I am Emanuelle McIntosh, and this is my beautiful friend Pam Roadnight. And today, you guys selected the following guests. Pam?
Well, she was sometimes called the Virgin Queen or Queen Bess. Elizabeth was the last of the 5 monarchs of the House of Tudor. Welcome, Queen Elizabeth I. Welcome.
She's saying thank you for allowing me to speak today. Now, I have to say, most spirits I've talked to are very kind of gentle, and they're soothing, and they kind of reassure me as I connect to them for the first following weeks before we do the interview. But she feels, I feel like she's caring, and she's extremely intelligent, but at the same time, I feel like she's this strict teacher who is strict because she cares. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just wanted to get that out there, that her energy is very different than many of the other guests that we've had so far, but still she's very loving towards me, and she's very appreciative that she's allowed to step forward today. So.
No, thank you for that. And we have, as always, terrific questions from your group, Rolling with Emma. We're going to start with Queen Elizabeth's childhood and move right on through from there.
She says she's ready.
Okay, thank you. Caroline would like to know what your childhood was like.
She says, I would like to use the words like abandonment, loneliness, confusion, rejection, and fear to describe my childhood. I was raised without parents, as my mother was beheaded by my father when I was so very young, which really caused so much confusion and created so many conflicting emotions deep within me. And I had no one to help me process and explain those emotions. I was raised by strangers, moving constantly. I also felt very much alone in the world because of the constant rejection of my father. And I was living in a constant state of fear due to the constant bullying that I received from family members, from strangers, and also constant threats that I received. But also many illnesses kept slaying my family members and friends, which were very scary experiences as well. So I was always in a constant state of fear, and I would like to say a state of preservation. I was trying to preserve myself and my life. So I felt like I was alone, and really no one would ever shed a tear should something ever happen to me. That's how my childhood felt like to me.
Louise would like to know what your father was like.
I disliked my father very much, not just for murdering my mother, which I later on as a teenager discovered was based on lies and false testimonies, but also because he did not care for me or invest any time in me. He wanted a son, and he got me instead. So in his eyes, I was a waste of space and energy, and thus he never really recognized me as his daughter. Now, despite his constant rejection, I still craved his acknowledgement of my existence, but unfortunately I felt I never received it. So he really was never like a father to me. I just felt like he was a cruel and heartless man.
You may have answered this a little bit. Kristen is wanting to know, what was your understanding of what happened to your mother when you were growing up? Was your view of her a positive one based on what you were told? Did you hold on to her memory as you got older?
Well, my mother stayed very much a mystery to me up to about the age of 6, because no one was allowed to talk about her to me. My father had forbidden that. So I eventually managed to convince some of my caregivers and some of the family members to open up and to release certain information. And so as I got older, I started to understand more and more of what had happened and who she was as a person. I started to trick people into providing more and more information about her. And I eventually found out that my father was tricked and lied to and based his decision, which really was forced by others upon him. He truly based his decision upon lies and false testimonies of many, many different people. So what I discovered after my transitioning is how much he regretted this decision and how much my presence reminded him of that mistake. So I knew my mother was not a saint in my lifetime as Elizabeth, but in my mind, she was my loving mother. That's how I wanted to see her. She was my mother who was innocent when she was led to the slaughter by a group of sick, manipulative, ego, and power-hungry men. And I kept my mother close to my heart, or at least the memory, the idea of her, by wearing her jewelry, by becoming what I believe to be the strong, stubborn, and powerful woman that I think she wanted me to be. And that's how I kept her close to me, by becoming a little bit of her.
Rosie is asking, from a spiritual perspective, why was your father so cruel? Did his behavior change due to an accident or injury?
Well, after my transitioning, I discovered that a jousting accident led to brain damage, which caused his extreme cruelty and a lack of empathy. It led to an emotional disconnection and a disconnection from his own self, in a way, from his own core being. You see, we all have a positive and a negative side within us. We all have positive and negative energy. And as we go through life, we choose which side will rule. Now, after his accident, the negative side was heightened and highlighted by the brain damage. And so he no longer had the ability to feel empathy and love, which really caused his cruel behavior and many of his decision making. So it was an accident, multiple accidents really, who created a disconnection in the brain and therefore highlighted his negative side.
Okay. Tony is asking, or stating, you were known as the Virgin Queen, but did you ever get the chance to love someone?
Well, I think that's a very personal question. But I will answer it for you, Tony. I believe my love was reserved for God and for my people, for my country. I cared very much for Sir Robert Dudley, but that courtship was never intended to be fulfilled.
Speaking of Robert Dudley, Dora is asking about the true story between you and Robert Dudley.
Well, Robert and I grew up together. We've known each other since we were very young. He was like a brother to me, and he knew many of my secrets and my fears. I would say that he was one of the very few who truly knew me as me, who truly knew my core and my heart. And I would say he helped me. He helped me a lot with many traumatic experiences as a young woman. But at the same time, he made life more fun.
Oh.
And I felt extremely comfortable with him. And he wasn't scared to challenge me. So he was fun. He was handsome. He was loving. And as we grew older, my feelings towards him did evolve and grow. And I became more fond of him and attracted to him. But I somehow always knew that that connection would never come to pass. Although I had hope for it from time to time, it just wasn't in the cards for that lifetime. But I can tell you that it has been in many other lifetimes.
Oh, nice. Nice. Tina would like to know, what were your thoughts about marriage then and now?
That's a very good question. Thank you for that question. During my lifetime as Elizabeth, marriage was a form of entrapment. That's how I saw it. It was a way to lose ownership of your own free will. It was a perfect way to lose everything that you are because you became someone else's property. Even if you were the queen, as a woman, you were seen as property. So after having witnessed the horrors of marriage within my own family, I promised myself I would never fall into that trap. I mean, you have to understand that royal marriages in that lifetime were never made out of love, but really were contracts between countries or money sources. And even when you did fall in love, I believed that that love would, this is what I've experienced watching and observing everyone else, that love would only be temporarily. And it always ended in some kind of bloodshed or pain. So that was my perspective as Elizabeth. Now, from my new perspective, I can now see, and I can gladly say that I have experienced it in another incarnations, that marriage can be wonderful and respectful and loving as long as there is equality between the parties in that marriage and we release all sense of ownership. Because no one can ever be someone else's property. Nobody can ever own your soul. And nobody ever should allow that to happen as well. That's how I see it today.
Very different. Very different. Jessica would like to know, was it a personal choice to not have children, or was that in the contract for you not to have them?
Well, I have to say, these are all very personal questions.
They are.
Okay. I'm not used to answering these kind of questions, but I will do my very best. I'm going to answer them just so all these speculations and these false rumors can be forever dismissed. How does that sound?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, let it be known that I truly loved children. They are so pure, they are so innocent, so unjudgmental, but I never had any of my own, so let that be clear. And the only reason I did not have any children is because I did not get married. And I truly believed that children should be created out of a loving marriage. Keep in mind, I was very religious. That was part of that religion. So I did try my best to embrace my country and all of its inhabitants as my children. And I took on the responsibility to rule and protect them to the best of my ability. I made mistakes. We all do. We are only human.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to answer your question, the answer is yes to both, because a spiritual contract is a free-willed intention, a personal choice, and one cannot exist without the other.
Well, we may have some more history to clear here, put to rest. Susan would like to know, was Mary, Queen of Scots, your cousin, unjustly executed? Can you give us some insights in why you had her executed and how you felt and feel about it now?
Well, I have to admit that my relationship with Mary was complicated due to her mother's actions towards me. But I would have never ordered her execution without knowing for sure that what she was accused of was accurate. Not after what happened to my mother. Now, many believe that I was forced or manipulated by others to make that decision. But I made this decision myself after a lot of deliberation. What people need to understand is that she did conspire with our enemies because she wanted to take over the country. I had to show my enemies that even as a woman, I could make these kind of challenging decisions. And I was hoping that it would in some way intimidate them. And I truly believe that it worked. Now, after our victory against the Spanish, I did contemplate from time to time whether I should have shown more mercy to her. But when I transitioned, she came to meet me and embraced me. And I discovered that we had agreed upon this event and experience, and that it was not only part of our desired spiritual contract, but also part of a collective shift in this dimensional plane on Earth. You see, I needed to allow Britain to heal and grow financially, emotionally, energetically, and as a community after years and years of suffering and creating unbalance within the country. But if Mary would have succeeded in my assassination and would have taken the throne, extremely dark times would have overshadowed Britain. She and her son would have been eventually assassinated by the Spanish themselves. And they would have ordered the execution of all who were not Catholic or in support of their ruling. So bloodshed and extreme suffering would have completely changed the history of Britain as you know it today, and it would have had a great influence on the history of the rest of the world as well. So I hope that clears things up.
Thank you. Anne is asking what your greatest regret is from that lifetime as Queen Elizabeth.
No. No regrets. No regrets. Never live your life holding on to regrets. There's no need for regrets, because as long as you follow your heart, then every decision you made at one time will have been an expression of what you wanted to learn and experience in that moment. So why regret everything you created and attracted consciously or subconsciously? Everything is your creation. So take responsibility Take responsibility for your life and focus and change your tomorrow if you do not like what you see today, but never regret. Because what you do not like today has made it very clear to you what you do want for your tomorrow. And it's giving you direction and energy to make those changes. So there's no regret necessary for anything you encounter or take action of in this life. It's only a way for the universe to show you where to go or where not to go.
Kay is asking if you believe in mediumship or medium related things. And I suppose that was in your human experience.
Well, I have to say I believe in Emma.
Yeah.
Can I say that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm so happy she's willing to give me her body to communicate to you. Okay, as Elizabeth, I believe very much in God and in the higher powers. And I would consult many different foreseers and astrologers for clarity and advice, future predictions, things like that. So I would say yes to a degree, because I allowed them to advise me, but their advice would never overrule my intuitive messages I received from within. So despite their advice, despite what they could see, the possibilities, because they never could tell me they never could tell me what really was going to happen. They would always say, well, these are the possibilities. Despite all of their advice, I would always, and I have to say this with pride, I would always follow my own intuition. That would be my first go-to.
Marie, tell us what a normal day would be like as the queen.
Okay. A lot would happen in a day, but I will try my best to make it as short as possible. Okay. Well, before I would awaken, my servants would make sure the fire is lit, the room is warm, and they would prepare my bath. As I woke up, they would undress me from my sleeping gown and put me in my bathing gown, and I would bathe before doing anything else. This was not very common for everyone. This is a very royal thing to do. Then they would dress me in a simple gown, and I would execute my morning prayers. I would pray before doing anything else, and I would pray for guidance and support. I would pray for assistance and for love. And after prayer, I would eat breakfast, which was usually very simple. And then I got dressed, and because I had to get ready for court, the dressing scene, which usually took between 2 to 4 hours to complete. What can I say? I was very vain, and so I was very demanding on how I wanted to present myself to the public. And then I would attend court and listen very carefully and address those that were attempting. Political matters and foreign affairs would be discussed there, but also other enlightened minds from across the country would stop by and share their stories or their new discoveries. I have to say, which really were the highlights of my day. I loved to keep up with what was happening in the world because I was mostly contained and restricted in my own exploration. I wasn't really allowed to roam the world freely as I would have liked to. And then I guess after court, I would go and take a stroll in the gardens, or sometimes I would take a ride with my horse. Um, Depending on what day it was, we would sometimes play games. Sometimes we would go hunting. We would dance. We would do many, many different things. We would not eat lunch as you guys do today. Just some snacks here and there. And then in the evening, I would I would get refreshed. So they would fix my makeup. They would bathe my feet a bit. It really depended on what I wanted at that moment. But I would be in some way or form refreshed, and I was made ready for the evening banquet, from which I would eventually retire and be prepared to have a good night's rest, to get undressed, get all the makeup off. That would take time as well. And then get into my nightgown and have some nice drinks. So that would be kind of a day. They weren't all the same, but that would be a normal day.
Okay. Johnny says, "Hi, Elizabeth. My question is it true that you were the first monarch to create the first institution for disabled people in Britain?"
Well, not entirely. I did ask Parliament to pass a series of laws to take care of the poor and the disadvantaged. And most of the poor then were people with disabilities. However, the help provided really was very basic, and the created facilities were rather grim. So I'm not convinced that I did much to aid these poor souls, and I'm sure that I could have done better.
Okay. Wendy is asking, in a man-driven society, how did you keep your wits about you and gain trust and respect for your leadership?
I had to outsmart them. I had to make them feel like I was one of them. And I had to, for example, I had to agree, which I'm not proud to admit, but I had to agree with them that women were not capable of doing many things on their own. But then I had to outsmart them by convincing them that I was different and special because I was handpicked by God to rule. You know, I learned many different languages, and I didn't always inform my foreign guests that I could speak their language. So I could listen into what they were really saying about me without them being aware that I understood every word. You know, as a woman, I had to use their own masculinity and their ego against them. And so I had to really use my female charm and wits to convince them that the idea that I implanted into their minds really came from them. And most of all, I had to believe in myself. I had to believe in myself that I could do what I said I would do. I had to believe, and everybody should believe in yourself 100%, because then you can accomplish anything. And that helps for all people, male or female, or both genders.
In your afterlife, Gia says, hello. I know this is asked all the time, but it's different for everyone. What happened when you transitioned? What did you experience?
Well, I actually felt like I fell asleep, and I woke up in a beautiful garden where both my parents stepped forward, and they were smiling, and they both had one hand reach out to me while holding each other with their other hands. So they were holding each other's hands, and then they were reaching out to me. And they both held my hands, and they took me to heaven. And for the first time, I felt what real love, real unconditional love truly felt like. I later on met Mary, as I said, and many others that I had known in many different incarnations. But seeing my parents happy together, being happy that I was there and guiding me to a beautiful place, was one of the best days of my life and death.
Oh. Megan is asking if you suffered from any health problems due to the white face makeup you wore, or is that just a legend? Were you as isolated as history portrays you?
Was I isolated? Yes, absolutely. You don't have a lot of space to move around and do whatever you please, although that's what people think, that you have the ability to do anything. But for all clarity, I died of old age and not of the makeup that I wore. Also, all women of stature wore white makeup. You know, that was very custom. If you were tanned, you were working outdoors. That's how we
So there were no health consequences to the white makeup to anybody?
Well, as I said before, I was very vain and I was very insecure of my outer appearance. And okay, yes, I was not considered to be beautiful. And I was even jealous of many of my bedmates, so I used my wealth to buy myself the most beautiful and eye-blinding garments and jewelry and wigs to really hide behind. But as I grew older and my wrinkles started to appear, I started to use more and more cream in my face, which really only led to an even more horrible and flaky skin. So it did do extensive skin damage. Yes. And I'm sure that the products inside the cream were not very beneficial for my system. However, I don't believe that it caused such damage that it would have made me ill. It did cause extremely bad skin, very flaky. Sometimes little grooves would appear into it, kind of like chapped skin. But I guess that was the price I paid for wanting to stay looking young and vibrant. Because I didn't want to give the men any reason for trying to push me from this throne. So I wanted to continue to stay vibrant and young looking and strong looking, and I did that with a lot of makeup.
Lilia is asking, what was the most impactful lesson or experience in your lifetime?
I would say discovering the truth about my mother's death, because it really changed my entire trajectory in that lifetime. But that said, I now know that that was all part of a divine plan for the collective healing and recovery of my country. So, but that's how I experienced. The moment I found out the truth about my mother, I became a different person.
And at such a tender age.
Yeah.
You may have touched on this previously. Lori is asking, how did you know who you could trust?
Well, that's very simple. I only trusted myself. If you cannot trust yourself, then don't even attempt to trust others. You need to trust what you feel intuitively, because then you will always know who speaks truth and who doesn't. But I always kept in mind that every individual is possible to do both, to lie, but also to speak truth. So I decided to only trust myself.
Tamara would like to know, is Elizabeth the First reincarnated in Elizabeth the Second?
No, the current queen is not an incarnation of my higher self.
Okay. Something else to put to rest.
Let's just say that being queen is a one lifetime experience. Let's just stick to one.
Understood. Annie would like to know, what advice would you give to the current UK government?
I would say listen to your people. Be fair and truthful towards them in regards to certain decisions you intend to make, and arrange a way to have the people's voice heard. A country is but a piece of land without the people in it to make it great. So listen to your influentials who provide and offer work facilities, education, healthcare, and stability. And remove your egos from this decision-making process, and just do what's best for the people, not what's best for you.
Kate would like you to, how would you describe yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses? How would you describe that?
Okay, that's a hard question. I'm sure many others would disagree with what I'm going to say. Well, I guess my greatest strength was my determination and my self-trust, and in a way my stubbornness as well. And I think my greatest weakness was my vanity. The biggest misinterpretation people have about me, I believe, was that I was a good, always loving, beautiful soul, an example, and a role model for feminine power. Because I never saw myself that way. Because what many people don't know is that I could be very cruel and abusive towards my servants and my maids. My vanity and my extreme insecurity of how I looked really would result in jealousy, in anger outbursts with really aggressive and violent tantrums, where many of those close to me would end up being hurt and even physically injured at times. I cared not for them as much as I should have, and I truly regret that the most, because they would go beyond to provide me with what I demanded from them. So I would say that was one of my many regrets, and one of the things that people choose not to see in me. I did have a violent streak in me, and to my sadness, it was to those who were the closest and most trustworthy.
Thank you for sharing that. Ina would like to know, how can we become great rulers in our own lives?
A great ruler takes responsibility for their own creation. So as creators and manifestors of our own life, take on responsibility. That's my advice.
Thank you. Thank you. That's Amazing.
Okay, guys, that's it for today. I want to thank you all for joining us again, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Pam, for joining me on this wonderful interview, and thank you for helping me with the questions.
Always a pleasure.
Now, if
You can
want,
find me too on Facebook, Pamela Rodenite, life coach, coach Pamela.
She's amazing. She really life coaches me sometimes.
It's true.
That's how we're friends. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with Pam, she's on Facebook and she also has a website. I'm going to put the links below, so don't be afraid to go check out her website. Like I said, once a month I will meditate and I will allow my spiritual team to bring forth 5 people who are willing to step forward and have an interview with us. And then out of those 5 names, I allow you guys, my followers, to pick who gets to do the interview. For spirit, it doesn't really matter. They know one day they will be able to step forward, and they just think this is a lot of fun, and they know it helps us to get more clarity in truth. That it helps us to get more clarity within our own journey. So they really love doing this, but many people are sending in requests. Please interview this person. Please interview that person. Know that I don't force spirits to step forward for interviews. I invite them in, and whoever is willing to do so, I will share with you, and then you guys can pick. I hope we get to see you next time. Who do we have next time?
Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher. Carrie
Fisher's
won.
next.
Yes.
And a very special Halloween guest, right?
We're going to have a very special Halloween guest who stepped forward and reached out to me. What's her name?
She's so special. So special. Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie Borden.
I don't know why she reached out to me, but I was putting away laundry and all of a sudden her name popped in and I was like, who are you again? I started talking to her, and she really wanted to get the opportunity to share her real story, because she said that it was the right time for people to receive it. Mm-hmm. So whatever that means. So I will be working with her a little bit as well, so I can get familiar with her energy, and then we can try a trance channeling. But yes, she's going to be stepping forward as well, so I can't wait. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.